I've been surprised at how valuable that is when you get a really good coach, especially just to start unlocking the information that you didn't realise was already in there. Can't imagine taking 90 days to actually start taking action as I've moved into somewhere, but as I come into a company that make me feel comfortable that I can add value in role is quite the important thing.
I feel like people underestimate how valuable that would be in just getting clarity, getting focus, and then, having that, as you mentioned, knowledge unlocked, which already is in your head.
I feel like a bit of imposter syndrome is good.
Going outside of your comfort zone, it's always going to have that imposter syndromes attached to it.
Sort of emotional and psychological drivers for imposter syndrome and burnout might be common.
Yes, definitely. People are difficult.
In the past few years, I've adjusted my relationship with work. I'm trying to emulate Gen Z a little bit more.
That's what my wife is telling me as well. I'm not though. I should become better at this. Hello everyone, welcome back to Mastering Tech Grow. Today we have a special treat, Dave, and we'll be talking about the imposter syndrome which everybody feels when they start the new role. Hi Dave, welcome.
Hi Mike, good to see you again. It's been a little while since we last had a chat.
Yeah, we met in a CTO Craft conference, isn't it? And we had a panel together, and now the name escapes me. It was about people. It was power to the people, something like that.
Yeah, something like that, about team development, hiring, looking after talent, retaining talent as well. And then I remember having a good chat about our brothers during lunch as well and the differences between our siblings.
There you go. Yeah, that was interesting one. The brothers. Right. So it is a continuity effectively of our chat, and we exchanged a couple of emails, Dave, and you were like, I started a new role now, and I am surprised how well I'm doing in this, how quickly I was developing value, and the fact that you didn't feel the imposter syndrome in this one. So that's the context and the premise of our show today. So let us know who Dave is, and let's get in the topic.
Yeah, sure. So I won't do like the long career history bit because, there's not a job interview and I'll be here for a long time. I'm sort of 20 years into a tech career, started as an engineer. I have never really been able to keep my mouth shut, and therefore I've ended up down the sort of management and leadership path instead of staying as an IC. I've worked through like a mixture of corporate and startup environments as well. I guess the bits that I really still continue to enjoy in the career are continuous delivery and sort of measurement and sort of enabling the machine and helping people move quicker, and like talent acquisition, retention, and culture building as well. Just creating somewhere that people enjoy working, basically.
That's a very sweet introduction. I love how you said I couldn't keep my mouth shut, so I ended up in the management. So do you think that's a must? Do you think people need to love talking to do leadership roles?
I don't think it's a must, but I think it's quite a common trait, as you bump into people, especially when you see those people that are maybe in the first tech lead role, they're just starting to take on some line management. It tends to be like the archetypal person who sees something that could be done better or is a challenge, and the mouth just opens and says, maybe we should do this. And they end up naturally sort of, I guess, slotting into those leadership roles in a team.
So it's almost... is a bias leaning towards extrovertish personality gravitating to these roles?
I don't see. I'd be interested. I don't see myself as an extrovert. I think I'm really quite introverted. I find it exhausting to be around a lot of people for a long period of time, and like I need to recharge my batteries. I was chatting to someone about it the other day actually, that I think I'm probably quite in the middle. I'm very happy in my own company, but I also like a bit of other people's company for a period of time. You seem quite, so having chatted before as well, you seem reasonably extroverted. Would you say that you are?
That's a good question, Dave. And I'm just like you. I do love company and people and exchanging ideas and then, just bouncing ideas, learning from each other. But the moment comes where I am like, leave me alone. I need to be in my own space, whatever that space is. Maybe I'll go for a walk or for a run. Maybe I'll just watch Netflix for like 4 hours. But I need to be alone. Like there should be no other voice to recharge my batteries. So maybe I am in the middle, just like you, Dave.
Yeah. And I can still be productive when I've got that sort of social exhaustion. But it's definitely like I often want to wrap myself in a bubble and just do productive focus work for a little while.
Yeah, like a deep work. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah,
I love that saying. I am definitely similar. I do need the time where, there's no chats. If you're doing remote, there's no notifications, there's no emails, there's, no phone calls. You just in your zone, yourself, just going through the to-do item list
yep,
alone without
yeah.
chatting with us. All right. So, can you give us a little bit about the role you started and why do you think you didn't felt any imposter syndrome in this one? Why now?
Yeah, because and been clear as well. It's the first time in my career that I've sort of felt this coming into a new role. So I started a new role end of January. We're now sort of like back end of April. So I've been in nearly 3 months,
Mm.
and it took me a little while to even to recognise that I wasn't feeling imposter syndrome in here. Um, why am I not doing? I I think I've done some difficult roles up until this point, like some really challenging roles, um, and and I guess I've gone through some small companies recently as well with. I'm trying to think of the right way of putting it. With like budgetary constraints is the best way of putting it actually as well. Where you need to achieve a lot with not a lot of resources, and then I'm coming into a bigger role, bigger business, bigger budgets, where it feels like I'm not as constrained. So that's one element to it. But I also feel like in those challenging roles, I've needed to, I guess, face a number of different things. And for the first time, I come into this thinking I'm not sure that it's going to throw net new problems at me. I feel like I've almost explored the skills framework. I don't think I'm necessarily brilliant at everything. I feel like I've tried most things once, so that there are less unknown unknowns. Actually, is probably a better way of putting it. So therefore, I'm not feeling that fear of the complete unknown. It feels like.
I can definitely see that. Effectively, the imposter syndrome, and let's maybe define it a little bit. So, how I understand is that you're coming in a role and you're actually not sure if you can get everything done. You're not sure if you can match people expectations. Maybe there's some elements and responsibilities around the role which is fairly new to you, so you'll need to pick this up while you're in the role, and that just compounds into that general feeling that you're really not sure if you can pull that role off and pull the weight of that role. Is that a good assumption of imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I think so. And you make me think that actually every job change up until this point has always been like a step up, a step up a ladder, more responsibility, and definitely like really clearly, explicitly more responsibility and a broader set of responsibilities coming in. I think this is the first role that I've had where it's felt like actually this is this is comparable. It's not got new sort of completely net new things that are going to change the direction for me. So I think that step in. If I reflect back on my last role change, for example,
Mm.
it was first step into a CTO role, and it was terrifying. And I really, it was really coming in. There were definitely feelings of am I the right person for this role, and am I going to be able to succeed coming into it?
How did you overcome that?
So in you asking that, I'm also thinking about what's repeatable. So in overcoming it in the last role, what have I found myself repeating as I come into this one? Some of it's sort of quite normal 90-day stuff. Some of it's probably a little bit unusual. So definitely a case of getting out and meeting people in the company, doing the information fire hose thing. Like, let me gather context, let me understand how your business works, build a mental model of it and the products that you sell, etc. Sorry, the products that you sell, etc. But then there's like a piece in there as well about working out what what have I done in a previous role that is repeatable and I'm going to be able to carry forwards into this one, and what do I need to separate and is something that really just worked in that environment and I'm not necessarily going to be able to carry forwards. Sorry, I feel like I'm losing my thread a little bit. I'll do a clap in a minute.
Yeah, it's okay. So so effectively the question was, and what you mentioned about previous role where the imposter syndrome was there. The question was, how did you overcome it? So am I right to say that just going through the details, as you mentioned, understanding the product, how you make money, getting the land, what's the saying, getting the map of the land, knowing the people and all the processes is effectively how you put that imposter syndrome down.
Yeah, and do you know what I think? What I've landed on is what for me is like my repeatable set of steps that as I come into a company that make me feel comfortable that I can add value in role is quite the important thing, and that comes from gathering context, knowing the direction that I'm coming in, and then also working out what I can reapply from previous roles that I've worked in, and then what am I offering that's new to the group? Where am I genuinely sort of going above and beyond the experience that you've got in the team already?
So
Yeah,
it's almost like a playbook, Dave, isn't it? It's like you have your own. Here's my 30 days, or here's my first 90 days look like. That's my playbook. Like, I'm gonna come in, I'll do this because that's what I learned in my previous role, and I'm just trying to reapply the same
yeah,
processes.
and you must have similarly. Yeah, sorry, I can't remember how long you've been with the current company for quite a while, so you. Yeah, you may have a similar playbook of coming in and meeting a new set of challenges.
Mm.
The sorry, I'm thinking a little bit about the. I wonder how similar our playbooks would end up being, and whether they're comparable across the two of us. Sorry, I'm completely losing it, Mike.
Yeah. Don't worry about it, Dave.
Do you know, I've never experienced this before as well. I
Yep.
think I'm a little bit distracted by the fact that I'm sat in an office environment, and you've got the social bit going off on the sides.
Yep.
I'm
Okay.
gonna actually. There's no point in me moving either as well because then I'm going to be in a different environment and a
Mhm.
different background. So yeah,
Yeah. Let's. I mean, if it's very uncomfortable, then we can do something about it. But otherwise, let's just continue,
yep, yeah,
and
yeah.
we'll cut things to a better shape. Don't worry about it. So the playbooks, right? I want to say I have a playbook, and but it's not like I've written playbook, right? It's not that I take notes and I have some type of retrospective of what I did in the first couple of days. But there's definitely a notion of I learned things in this role, so naturally I will bring the same things in this current or new role. But there's a gotcha as well where I'm trying to understand the context of new role better before I start playing things, because the contextual changes are quite important. You might be having a much bigger headcount, you might be having a different products, different people, and sometimes what you learn in one role, you coming out and applying a new one, not necessarily that's going to work. And a very good example is like you did Scrum, and you coming in new environment, and Kanban is maybe a more applicable agile way of doing things. And then if you try to force Scrum onto people, it's probably not going to stick, right? So there's definitely a context of how you play your playbook, if that makes sense.
Yes, and that playbook changes through your career as well, right? As you pick up new experiences, you pick up the new things that you've been reading, like new things that you might have tried out in a previous role and you found it succeed and you want to repeat. Definitely like playbook as I've come into this role. Actually, there's been one weird little thing that has added to my playbook from the last roles I've come into this one, centered around Slack. We went through like a cleanup exercise in Slack in my last company. We deleted loads of archive channels. We renamed a bunch of things, and it might seem like an odd thing to do, but I guess when you're in like a primarily remote first culture as well, it's like the cultural hub of your team. It's where most of the conversations happen. So coming into this role, we've gone through and we've archived maybe sort of 50% of the channels. We've renamed the rest of them. We've made them more discoverable. But I guess there's some softer things that it's given me coming in as well. it's given me the pulse of the conversation going on in the teams, because I've needed to be in all the Slack channels to see what's going on. And it's sort of got my name known as well, because you're popping into channels and saying, hello, is this channel still valid? What do you use it for, etc. So it's given me the deeper context that sits alongside, like maybe the strategic bit that you get from conversations in like an SLT or something like that.
Mm-hmm. I love that. It's almost like here's your onboarding first couple of weeks. You're gonna meet these people and you're gonna say hi to these people. It's the same process, but it's more for a remote culture where you have a lot of chats happening and you can pop into this and go like, "Hello, everyone. I joined. This is what I'm doing. What are you guys doing?" Just putting your name out there. And you're right. Reading what people are talking about and in the most recent way, I feel like it's a very good picture of what you're actually stepping into. Because there's an element of like this recency bias where if you look at the last 7 days and see what's cooking, you can get a very good sense of what people will be thinking about, what they're going to be talking about. And that is an opportunity to really look at these low hanging fruits, get them done or get them improved and make your mark very, very quickly. Which leads me to your question, Dave. You mentioned that it took only a couple of weeks to get you on the feet and actually adding a real value to the business in this current new role. Can you talk us about what that actually was?
Yeah, you mean in terms of like what the value was and what it
Yep.
started changing?
Yep.
So I guess this ties into the confidence and the imposter syndrome side of it as well. You made a comment earlier in about the playbook and the at what point do you start making plays and when are you information gathering? And like the first 90 days bit almost feels cliched now, because I can't imagine taking 90 days to actually start taking action as I've moved into somewhere. So like doing the work around Slack was almost dead easy. It was low hanging fruit. It's a low threat way to get in and start getting involved around things. Alongside that, I'm quite a sort of systems-based thinker. So even though you've got people and process and technical process delivering software, I sort of tend to think of that as a system across all the people and their motivations and all the complexity that we use to deliver software. So I've started to map that out basically, and you do it initially through conversations, and it's very opinions based around you should speak to this person or I see a challenge there. But then starting to map out the value stream of how software is actually delivered as well, and key measurement points really around things like Jira, around pull requests and commits, etc. And in terms of actually then adding value quite quickly, you can imagine you can combine those conversations with some measurement really quite quickly, and can start getting in with some data-driven opinions to ask. I guess start with the stupid questions, but then ask gradually more challenging questions because you've got the data to back it up.
I love that map of the land. Okay, so what I'm doing if I'm new to this? Like, let's say if we go back a little bit in your own experience, and when you started transitioning into these roles, you started getting more responsibilities. Maybe you even made that, from being an individual contributor coming to your first leadership roles. That's very scary, right? That's a totally different room. You're coming from I'm coding all day to now I'm leading people. It's very natural you're gonna feel the imposter syndrome. It's like, any tips you would give to people, to especially like young individuals feeling that feeling very strongly, like what can they do today to hopefully get it down?
Yeah, there's two big stages that I see there actually as well, and one might be interesting to come back to in a minute. One is for the transition from IC into manager. The second is almost like when you start to give up your technical skills as a manager, how do you then remain authentic and not become an imposter, feel like an imposter dealing with individual contributors and retaining your technical skills? So I guess in the first bit where you are stepping into a leadership role, it feels like a long time ago to think back as well now, because I'm probably going back, 10 to 15 years. the first bit is that piece where you start to carry out one-to-ones with people. You're managing people for the first time. You're probably trying to emulate the good managers that you've seen, but feeling a little bit uncomfortable, because you're talking about people's progression and all the pieces that you associate with being a good manager and supporting them and helping them work through challenges. And actually, sorry, I'm reminded of a comment that one of the other guys on the panel made in the CTO Craft conference. Is thinking about genuine, like, what are some practical pieces of advice that you can give me? There's an excellent book by Camille Fournier called The Manager's Path. So, if you are just stepping into, I can provide a link afterwards as well. If you're just stepping into that management and leadership role, it lays out steps at different levels of seniority around the practical bits of how do you run a good one-to-one, how do you support someone in their career path, etc. And in a long way, I think I'm saying is to start equipping yourself with the skills so that you feel comfort, and start exercising the muscle of this new skill set as you move away from IC and into leadership and management. Two other things that come to mind. One is to, I guess, start understanding the difference between management and leadership as well, because they're two completely different skills. Management is obviously the pastoral care, is the bit that I'm describing, but then also leadership as an IC, people have probably been practicing it already. They've probably been helping to lead and drive the direction and repeat comms into teams and reset vision into teams before they even realised they were doing it. So I guess recognising the skills that you've got already. I'm going to pause so I don't carry on going off down a big monologue.
No, that was good. I love that. And how important you think mentorship is in exactly that transition from, maybe not even this transition, but going from individual contributor to leadership role or management role? That's a big change, right? That's a literal, what is called the lateral career change. You're basically going from one path to another path, right? So you're not going vertical, you're just changing path. That's a big change. And having a mentor during that change, I think it's quite strong. But once you're in the path and then you go vertical, you just sort of developing new skills. Again, mentorship is likely important. So from your experience, did you have a mentor? Did you had experience, or was your direct manager your mentors? Just what's your general take on mentorship around career path?
I've never had like a formal mentor. I've never had a mentor that's been outside of my line management chain. But when I think about it, I recognise that I've had mentorship from a variety of different directions. So earlier in my career, it would definitely have come from line managers. And I think that's primarily been when I've still been in that technology line management chain. So whether it's an engineering manager above me or going on up to a CTO above me, and where their skills have been directly applicable to the role that I'm fulfilling. I think as I've then started to move beyond that, I've needed to get it from elsewhere. So joining communities of CTOs and of engineering leaders so that you've got peer mentoring, and you can bounce ideas and challenges off other people that have faced similar before and can sort of share patterns with you. And then I've only just, ironically, had my first sort of coaching sessions in the past year or so as well, which I appreciate is quite different from mentoring. But I've been surprised at how valuable that is when you get a really good coach, especially just to start unlocking the information that you didn't realize was already in there.
Yeah, it's definitely undervalued piece of what's the word I'm looking. It's anybody can have it, right? You can find a coach and you can find a mentor in any space. It's just about actually going likely on LinkedIn and just doing a search. But I feel like people underestimate how valuable that would be in just getting clarity, getting focus, and then, having that, as you mentioned, knowledge unlocked, which already is in your head, just allowing you to put that picture much, much better.
Yeah. And with mentoring, I've definitely found that it's been a You've faced this experience before, and you've got some concrete advice to offer me. With coaching, I've found that it's helped me to clarify what are my goals and what's the direction I'm heading in, and what are some practical steps I'm going to take to get there. And then I still might come and ask someone externally for, have you needed to solve this step before, and what's a shortcut basically based on your experience.
Yeah, that's a subtle difference, isn't it? Like coaching is more about allowing you to reach the decisions by asking more questions of you, and trying to lead you towards something with those questions, where mentoring / advisor is like, here's how I did it, take it, you can replicate the same. So there is a subtle difference in that one. Often it's used interchangeably, like coaching and mentoring, but how the sessions will look like will be different depending on that word. So you mentioned authenticity, Dave, which I would like to pick apart a little bit. So once you're moving from individual contributor to becoming a leader, you're losing that old self, which had all the skills. Maybe it's a language, maybe it's cloud engineering, maybe you're DevOps or whatever, and you're developing that new personality, which is now the leader, which will get shaped by the skills and the new knowledge you're getting. Once you made that transition yourself, how did you dealt with that letting go and embracing the new one?
So I'm not going to lie, I went through a bit of an identity crisis with this, and I think that's not uncommon with people as well. So in my role at Visa, I moved in one step from a team of about 30 people to about 80 people. So it went from still having your hand in technically to just completely hands off, no technical side, needing to care about a significant budget, effectively needing to learn to do a completely different role. So it was quite easy to let go. And I think actually it was probably too easy. It was so easy to let go that I completely stepped away from anything, even architectural. There was like barely a technical element to my role for a while. The bit that I then struggled with is when I moved on to pick up a new role is feeling the authenticity of I can still be technically opinionated and I can still do the technical side of things. So I found myself needing to like challenge myself and dive right back into. I went from 80 back down to like 2 people, and was in a position where a team needed to build back up again. But I guess knowing that I needed to get my hands on technically, get them dirty again, to prove to myself more importantly than anything that I can still sort of build those skills back up. And found myself actually as a lazy manager for a little while, and asking someone in the team a question instead of stopping and going and doing a bit of research to understand how to use this new tool. So it was definitely a muscle that I needed to exercise for a little bit there. That was 10 years ago. So since then, I think I've carried that confidence with me that it might be difficult, but I know that I can move between the two. And have then made sure to not let that technical muscle atrophy so far that it's really hard to exercise it back again.
Interesting. So you went one side, came back, another side. Do you think this ping pong has a positive or negative side to it? I'm just trying to think. If you would have spent all these years just doing leadership, maybe you would develop more of of like management capabilities. But going in betweens almost keeps you in that lane where you go like, I'm doing a little bit of management, I'm doing a little bit of coding. It's like if you reflect back, you think that's a good call, or it had its own drawbacks?
I'm totally biased, but I wouldn't do it differently now, because I think it allows me to move cleanly between the two. So I can get in and have a conversation with an engineer, or I can have conversations, and it allows you to be a bridge as well, actually, and it allows you to to translate the technical conversation into the non-technical, or to go up into strategy or down into we've got a production incident and get into detail. It's definitely stopped me from specializing, like completely into the technical or completely out into the strategic, for example. And I recognise my bias, but I wouldn't do that differently if I was to go back and have the time again.
So you do love then both of these domains coming together and sitting in the middle and being able to participate in any of these.
Yeah, because in a way, I feel like I'm getting away with it. It feels like I'm allowed to have all the fun of I have a seat at the
Mhm.
table in important discussions. I like the discussions that set the direction of a business, as well as I can get my hands dirty and I can get involved in something technical and play with the Lego for a little bit. I guess
Okay.
where do you find yourself sitting as well, Mike? Out of interest.
Well, I had the same identity crisis as you did, Dave, and it probably was about 2 years. It was very, very difficult to let go because of that imposter syndrome. I just didn't feel that I got enough knowledge or have enough knowledge, even with reading all the books and trying to exercise all that leadership stuff. I still feel like I'm not really good at it. I always having issues, or maybe it's just being self-critical. But I definitely felt that imposter syndrome, and as a result, I would gravitate towards doing individual contributions, and I really enjoy doing cloud engineering or just architecting solutions in general. And I found myself stuck in that state for like a couple of years at least before I was like, okay, it's time to let go. It's time to look at proper delegation. It's time to look how you actually build people around yourself and just become a leader for the teams. But I definitely was there for a couple of years at least. And then when I fully transitioned, I just took this notion of I still have a lot of knowledge and I can have the conversation, of course, but I'm not going to be investing my time to keep that knowledge and skill sharp. I will just trust that I can hire good people which are much smarter than me in these domains, and I will continue building myself up as a leader and manager, which effectively takes me into very processy and strategic place where you think at the zoomed out level of how things tick. How can we make them faster? How can we automate elements? Then you look at people, of course, if you have a good compositions of teams, and talent retention and hiring and all that.
Yeah,
That's me. But
I'll,
yeah,
I'll
I
be
get
clear
what
as
you're
well.
saying
But
about. Yep.
I'll be clear as well, by the way, I'm not talking about me writing production code or anything like that when I say
Mm.
about getting my hands dirty. The stretch is probably about as far as writing a Jupyter notebook to wrangle some data that's useful for me as a manager and a leader,
Mm.
rather or writing something that's going to enable a developer rather than actually sort of getting in and doing dev work or anything.
There you go. I,
But I think it's keeping your hands dirty just enough that you can still have a good conversation.
Yep. Yeah, I get that, and I do that. Let's say on the hobby time or my personal time. It's like AI and ML, and you want to play with things, and so you still naturally do things because it's just who you are, right? We are in the tech industry, we are information technologies, and we love that stuff. That's all we knew all our lives. So it's one of these huge parts of who you are, which maybe you never fully let go, right? It's like you always come back to tinker with technologies. It's just as natural. So now I'm thinking about what actually helped me to let go of that imposter syndrome when I was doing this transition. Any skill development comes to mind for you when you think about why, maybe not why, when you think about these all the times when you felt that imposter syndrome, what actually helped you to say goodbye to it, or feel it at the lower level, but as a skill, right? As a like, I went and I learned how to do one-to-ones, or I learned and this.
Yeah, and my obviously I've walked my own path, and everybody's path's going to be different. But there's probably like I can think of probably maybe five key skills that have helped me as I've grown, and it's always come into it's always been because I've needed to work with a peer, and in order to work with a peer, I've in a different area as well. I've needed to pick up the skills to be able to work with them well, and bearing in mind how far back in time I'm going as well, and so working with a head of QA back in Visa, and therefore needing to learn about automated testing so that you can have sort of good, challenging conversations, and then stepping outwards into DevOps and continuous delivery and how do you get things into production well. And nowadays they're just part of engineering, so they're not necessarily the skills that you'd pick up as like quite a junior developer nowadays. But then, as you've moved on, the management skills that we mentioned, and sort of been able to look after a team. And then, as I've gone further up, I think being opinionated around products, being able to work with product leaders really well, and caring about the product strategy and the direction the business is going in, and being fluent around things like user research, foundational research for like the user-centered design practices that you get, and being able to just have reasonable conversations. And again, I had massive imposter syndrome around all of that for years, and it's taken a while to sort of ease into it. And then most recently, been able to work well with sort of other leaders inside the business. So I've been able to have good commercial conversations and finance and the way that the business operates, and been not just a customer of those other leaders in the business, but like a respected peer that I've got an opinion that's going to help you, and building the confidence that I know enough that my opinion's valid almost.
Okay.
I'm not sure what the next bit is because there's an unknown out there that's not bitten me yet. I don't know what the next one is.
That's actually quite fun, isn't it? Or would you like to know?
Well, I'd like to know if there's a gap something that you've encountered that I've not mentioned there in like your big steps.
Oh, right. Okay, I misunderstood that.
Sorry, that wasn't where I was leading as well, either. But now that you mention it, it'd be interesting to know.
From my perspective, when it comes to gaps of skills, which led me to have imposter syndrome.
Like I guess the big. So if you think about the peers that you've worked with over the years, where you had imposter syndrome and then you learned about a new discipline, and it's made you more rounded, like a more comfortable but more rounded leader overall. So I guess if I'm going, like some of the technical disciplines, management, products, like the way a business operates, is are there like layers to the onion that I've not described in those?
For me personally, it was more like tactical things, and I think what comes to mind very, very quickly is one-to-ones. I think when you step into that role, a big part is taking care of the team, which you mentioned, and how you do that. It's going to be these one-to-ones to actually understand how to run these well, how to take notes, how to action, and how to serve the team. That was a big one for me because I never did that before. I was part of one-to-ones where people do to me, and my understanding was that that's almost like a progress report, right? Which was a wrong understanding. That's not a notion of one-to-ones. So for me, that was understanding how to tactically do this well was a big change in just getting, okay, well, I can do this, I can take care of the team. And the second one, which came when we scaled very quickly and we needed to hire a lot of people, I stumbled on this process, or it's a book, it's called The Ideal Team Player. And it's written by the same guy who wrote the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. I forgot his name now. So he has this book, which is very, very tactical about how you recognize, a good team players, how you do interviews, how you even can re-interview people if you inherit the teams. And he gave this very tactical approach of how you actually can do, hiring and sort of understand what teams you have. So that was a big one as well. Again, it's very tactical, right? So for me, these two come out, which makes me realize that I need something tactical to move forward. Like conceptually speaking, I feel like you can find that answer, you can find it online, a mentor can give it to you. But what pulls away the imposter syndrome for me is actually knowing what you can do today and being a lot more tactical about that domain. So that was me.
Yeah, and I guess if you think of those all as tools in your toolkit, recognizing that you've got a more and more complete toolkit, and you might not have the best of every tool, but you've definitely got something that you can apply to each situation. I think that's definitely something I've recognized in the past year or two. And then the challenge is still continuing to grow, continuing to learn and going, I've not got all the answers, and therefore where are like the gaps and the things that I should be remain really open to the ideas that people have got in the room.
100%. Yeah. If you close down, if you have, here's my way, here's my playbook, that's how I do it. It's just not going to work out. The world moves, technology moves, people find better ways, and you always want to listen to other opinions. And we come back to your point about communities and having, network and peers to talk about things. It's in my view that's essential. When you reach a certain level, what the scope changes for you. You go from like, I'm a startup CTO of 6 people to something like I'm a leader of leaders, and indirectly I have hundreds of people. That's a totally different context, and totally different tools and processes will apply. So you want to have people to be able to source opinions, because it's going to be so many different challenges, and there's going to be a lot more challenges than you can deal with, and they will come from all the angles, as you mentioned, product and engineering processes and finance and all of that. You want to have a network to be able to go in and talk about this and just ask the question. So maybe coming back to your previous question, Dave, maybe that's what I would add is having people around yourself, or building that network of support where you can go and source information and have chats with.
Yes, definitely. Sorry, as we're chatting this back and forth as well, I feel like a bit of imposter syndrome is good. So the fact that I don't have any imposter syndrome coming into this role is probably a sign that I've not challenged myself enough with the role that I've moved into. And therefore there's not the stretch, and that you think about growth mindset. There's not the intrinsic growth that exists in the definition of the role that I've accepted, and therefore you think, okay, I've got the tools to pick this up, and I'm definitely finding opportunities to grow once I've hit the ground, and I'm enjoying it. But I think it's almost like a transparent challenge that you want to have in accepting the next role is to go, okay, this scares me a little bit, basically.
So effectively what we're saying is that going outside of your comfort zone, it's always going to have that imposter syndromes attached to it, because it's an unknown territory, which basically will lead to having that feeling, can I conquer that territory? Can I do well in this new thing? Which is,
Yeah, exactly.
that's definitely a good shout, Dave. Definitely a good shout. So effectively we're saying maybe don't step so much out of your territory that you feel overwhelmed, and you get stuck by the sheer fear of, I don't know what's going on, I don't know how to deal with all of this. But having a little bit of this is, you're stretching your boundaries, which is effectively you growing.
Yeah, and if I think back through past few roles, I noticed the cycle shorten. So the time to becoming comfortable of your own value in each role became quicker. And I just assumed that this role, it was like a natural conclusion that at some point you just feel valuable at the point when you join. Whereas really, as we chat in this room, I'm thinking, sorry, this is becoming a coaching and a therapy session for me as well, by the way. That at some point I assumed it was a natural conclusion, but at some point it sort of disappears. But actually, I'm thinking that as I move into the next role, I should be actively seeking it out a little bit, as to what is going to make me a little bit uncomfortable. And I think recognizing why that next role makes me feel uncomfortable as well, and whether the growth around that feeling of discomfort is a thing that I'm after pursuing.
That's a very good shout. That's a very systematic and strategic look at it. Like you mentioned that you love systems, so that's, I feel like that's coming from you and how you would approach that. But that's very well put. So I have this one colliding question / challenge, which I personally felt as well. So as a leader, you want to employ humility and empathy in many situations, because you really want to understand where people are coming from with their own challenges, and sometimes making quick decisions it's a bad call. So you really want to try to understand them. But on the other hand, you want to showcase some confidence and some assertiveness with things you're doing to get that imposter syndrome away. So you position yourself like, I know what I'm doing. I got this. How do you balance those two?
Yeah, because you're then trying to balance out being a good human, and being easy to work with I think also, like, I guess, leveraging the experience that you bring into a conversation. So I think that definitely starts with asking questions. So like lead with a question instead of leading with an opinion. Oh God, there was something. I remember having a conversation with our chief behavioural science officer in the last role, and so yeah, and basically talking about turning up to any conversation with an opinion. but don't start with the opinion. Start with asking questions and asking what somebody else's point of view is, folding that into your mental model, and then responding. Because then, even though you've turned up with an opinion, it might completely change off the back of what that person said to you, and you. And even actually, if that opinion you've turned up with is the right way to go, by folding the two things together, you create like a more compelling argument. You show you that you've actively listened, basically.
Mm.
So that's one part. But that sounds like I'm answering your question with "this is how you win," rather than like "this is actually how you remain." Keep the humility and working well with people. I guess like another thing that's wrapped up in there as well is recognition that I'm getting older. I'm 44. The world's moving on. The next generation that are coming through are working so differently to how I did earlier in my career. So the things that I think are right based on my experience are not necessarily the best way to do things anymore. So I think recognizing that things genuinely do change. So, I'm thinking ChatGPT, Copilot, the way that people stitch together software nowadays, and people's educational background as well, actually.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good shout. I love that the first part about just active listening is the hashtag active listening or the keyword active listening, but how you actually go about being tactical with active listening. It's a very well put, Dave, and it does serve well of just asking the questions, getting all the details, and trying to reframe that in your mind and see if you actually understand what the person is saying before you make any judgment calls.
I didn't know it was called active listening as well, by the way, until having that conversation with the Chief Rural Science Officer. So I sort of stumbled on it accidentally over 10 years of. So I don't know what I was doing for the first 10 years when I wasn't actively listening. But then suddenly, I guess, having an epiphany and recognizing how much of a difference it makes.
Yeah.
Sorry, you were going to say?
Yeah, because it's very normal and very human for fresh and young leaders to actually come out and take the situation which we just discussed and go like, this is what you're doing. Like instead of asking these open questions and trying to source that information, aka active listen, they feel that now as a leader, their job is to basically, tell people what to do, and they try to fill the gaps, often quite poorly, often not exactly what's being said, and make actions, which is not what you should be
Yep.
doing. And that's one of my learnings out of one-to-ones. It's like it's not a status report. It's not you telling someone what to do. It's really that active listening piece of where you just asking questions, you're trying to sort that information and do some pattern matching across the whole teams, and trying to pick these big things, big high initiatives where you can change or do better and affect as much people as you can or as much business part as you can. So let's say, I'm listening to what we're discussing. I'm reading books as well. I'm doing all that I can. And wherever I am, maybe I'm a fresh leader, maybe I'm a seasoned leader, but I still feel that imposter syndrome. I still have these self-doubt talks in my head. How do you, what do you do? How do you battle this? And the tips of how people could approach that?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, a challenging one. Do you mind if I flip it round to you to start with, so that it buys me a bit of thinking time as well whilst we're chatting about it?
How would I go
Well,
about this, right?
yeah.
So for me, maybe I like system thinking as well as you. Again, hashtag system thinking. I think there's a book or thinking in systems or something like that where you try to take things apart and you get that focus, you get that clarity of what you can actually do right now with the information you have, with the context you have. Because the stress and the imposter syndrome comes from unable to action things. Once you start actioning things, you get an emotion, and the emotion it doesn't give you that feeling. Actually staying still, what causes that feeling, overthinking or over stressing about the situation. So how I would approach, even, if I have these self-doubts, I would effectively ask, like, what is expected out of me and what is the outcome I'm trying to achieve with this project or with that task, which is, I'm feeling imposter syndrome about. I would try to take it apart, see what is the next step I need to take, get some clarity, and then just start executing whatever that small step is, getting in motion of getting things done. And that, for me at least, it tends to remove that element of I don't know what I'm doing.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So my family might disagree with this, but I'm quite a low emotional responder. So therefore, if I guess part of it for me is like recognizing an emotional response at work, and it tends to be the negative emotional responses that you recognize, which is like anger, frustration, the down, the sort of is it cortisol, like the stress hormone? It's like the cortisol type responses, and then becoming good at introspecting and being able to, I guess, isolate the fact that this emotion's occurred, and then isolating what drove that emotion, and then from there, like especially if it's been an interaction with another person, is unpicking what led collectively between, again, thinking about things as systems really, is what led between the two of us to drive into that situation. Is it the culture of the organization? Is it my background that's led me to this place? Is it your background? And I associate imposter syndrome largely with negative emotions. So I guess it's then catching those where they've occurred and sort of isolating it for yourself. Just trying to think if I've had any like recent examples that I've needed to work through things like that. And I think definitely like coming into the role that I'm in now, trying to like I said near the beginning of the conversation, trying to unpick which of the things that I hold true and I should be sort of carrying through in this. And it's quite like a consultancy heavy environment as well. There's not a lot of permanent employees, so then needing to go, actually, I think I'm going to need to sort of win this one through influence instead of like the power bit that you mentioned. Sorry, and again, not command and hashtag not command and control, but there's definitely like there's an unspoken level of influence when you're a permanent line manager of people as well. Sorry, I'm going off
Yeah.
a bit of a ramble there.
Now, but you stumbled in a very good area, which is the influence. Which let's come back to the influence. And when you were talking about the negative emotions or association of negative emotions with imposter syndrome, what popped in my head is psychological safety, which we know is the number one of getting teams to gel and getting the environment where teams can actually perform, is that everybody feels safe to share their opinions and say what they think. So if I'm feeling imposter syndromes, could that be as well a reflection on your peers that there's no psychological safety around?
Yeah, 100%. And actually thinking about some of the challenges in this current role, it's been I've previous role was good psychologically safe environment, so like a good generative culture, and I guess to put like a definition around generative as well for listeners that have not come across it, so high psychological safety, high cooperation, and bridging across teams is encouraged, etc. And I bumped into a couple of examples in this current role where I've assumed psychological safety, and I've acted as if I'm in a psychologically safe environment, and it's driven a negative response from people around me, and it's because they're just not feeling that same psychological safety that I am. And then the challenge is, as you're alluding to, is like, how do I create that psychological safety, which is doubly important if you're in a leadership role as well. I some of my methods around that might be a little bit unorthodox, so I'll act the fool a little bit and jerk and mess around to be clear that not all work is dead serious all the time. Definitely try to, and this is challenging. I try to act in a peer-to-peer relationship with everyone, whether I'm working up or down or sideways or whatever. But people can get distracted by your job title as well, obviously.
Mm.
So thinking about it, that peers, do you find yourself running afoul of that same challenge of I'm trying to act as peers and work well together and create psychological safety, but people assume sometimes that the thing that you say is an edict rather than just an opinion?
Mm. Yes, definitely. Um, People are
And
difficult.
just, yeah, and like how do you almost like make the permission really explicit and clear that this is not hip. It's not the highest paid person's opinion. It's it's just like we're all equals in this decision making.
Well, I mean, how I think about the process of psychological safety within the teams is it's effectively it's an outcome of creating a trustworthy environment. And trust is often, or at least again from my experience and my views, is based on being authentic as a person. It's very hard to get people trusting you, or almost impossible if they think you're wearing a mask. Like, you bring someone else to the job, you bring someone else when you're in meetings, and you bring someone else when you're having conversations, and then there's another one of you in your personal life, right? So I really just start being myself, and as you rightfully put it, you do some jokes, I do the same thing. With time, people go like, oh, that's who you are, right? And then when you have that, they know what to expect from you. They start to develop, that trust, that how you communicate, what you're saying, that the fact that you don't hide information, you're quite open, you're quite transparent. That sort of leads towards that trust. And once you have that, then I feel like people are safe, or they feel safe, and that they trust you. They can have conversations with you, which effectively eventually leads towards that psychological safety. That's how I unpack that. When it comes to more tactical things, again, I would just go into that element of authenticity. It's like, are you actually being yourself at work? Do you want to say a joke, but you hold yourself off because you think people will take it wrongly? You're putting on a mask, right? You're not showing yourself. Do you want to do something, but you're not doing this? I mean, there's a politics around this, what you can actually do in office and what you shouldn't be doing, because you're gonna get into trouble with HR. There's a there's an element of this is who I am. Once people start trusting you, I feel like that by default leads towards that safe environment for them to deal with you.
Sorry, current role. I continued as if I'd been in the last role. You carry on, you're cracking jokes, you're messing around a little bit with your leadership team, and it's been met sort of slightly deadpan because it's a bit more of a serious environment. But I've just taken that as a personal challenge that I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to make you all giggle in meetings a little bit, and I'm getting there as well gradually.
I mean, you're absolutely right by saying that people take work too seriously. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's a business. We're either winning, which business is growing, or we're losing. And, if we're talking about big business, there's going to be importance notion, or the general environment it will be quite important, right? So you need to sort of pick and choose when you do things, because at the end of the day, we might be talking about big things and decisions being made which affect hundreds of people's lives. So it's not like, you're talking about big deals and you crack some, wrongly placed jokes.
Yeah. So
Outside
I
of
read
that,
your room as well.
yeah, the work, we spend 8 hours a day, which is a lot of waking time as a people, as individuals, we spend at work. If you're gonna not be yourself at work, it's just gonna, as a leader, I think it's gonna be quite difficult, right? You're not going to feel yourself. It's going to be two of you, one at home, one at work. I tend to, from experience, think that authenticity and who you are leads to trust, and that leads to psychological safety within the teams.
Yeah, it's a really good point actually, and it's something that I just took for granted without even thinking about it. It's like a key assumption that you act yourself with people.
So we talked a little bit about how feeling imposter syndrome is actually good, because you know that you're going to be on a path of growth. And I just wanted to almost like re-emphasize this. It's, if you're not really feeling it at all, it's probably because you're quite comfortable where you are right now in a role, what you're doing. And if you really think about growth, there has to be some element of like, okay, this is scary, I'm not sure what I'm doing over there. So that's because we've been attacking this from all the angles as a bad thing, but it actually is an outcome of a quite good thing, which is the growth orientated mindset, isn't it?
Yeah, and like it's hard to hear you work through those sentences. It makes me think, damn, I'm not challenging myself enough in current role, and therefore I need to be challenging myself more in the months to come. So
Okay.
yes, completely agree. Which is not the outcome I expected from having this conversation, but it's a good one.
So what are you thinking? How will you challenge yourself in the next couple of months?
So I'm definitely like I'm learning things, and I am sort of progressing in this current role. I'm doing challenging things, but it's not scary. But it's an interim role as well, so it's got a finite lifespan. Do you know what I? This is going to turn into career counselling for me. I think what I need to do after this is probably go back into a permanent role with skin in the game, and with like a product challenge that I'm excited about and that terrifies me slightly as well, and that I'm going to invest like multiple years of my life back into. I can tell that's just where my heart is, basically.
Hmm. But it's good to have a plan. I mean, it all starts by, here's what I'm thinking. Let me try to unpack this, get some focus, see what I need, and go after your goals. But you're absolutely right, Dave. I mean, committing to a business and a product you will help someone to build out. It's we take it for granted. We just call it a job. Yeah. Oh, I'm
Yeah,
going to do this, but at some point, and maybe that's where that maturity comes in play, which you mentioned earlier, is that you start looking at things differently. You start looking at this as a big decisions. I'm going to commit like 3 to 5 years. I know the challenges which will be coming. Maybe they will be new to some extent, but there will be a lot that I'm bringing as my toolbox. I know what I'll do, and you see at these roles in the different colors than what I want to say young individuals do, because for them it's just like new company, new buzzwords, and just a role. But with maturity, you look at roles quite differently. And interestingly, you mentioned interim role and the fine line between growth and how you look at it. Would you say that then interim roles are they expect you to sort of come in and just go get with things, and there's by nature it's lack not lack but less of challenging situations, which leads to more growth compared to like a permanent roles.
yeah. It's hard for me to draw conclusions because this is my first interim role. I've never
Oh, right.
so in
Okay.
20 years never contracted before this. Um, in coming into this role, though, there was definitely an expectation of we're bringing in somebody here who can deliver a step change for us, and is bringing experience to the table that we don't have in the team. And I think actually that expectation been there before I joined is probably part of what's made it feel more comfortable in terms of like feeling less imposter syndrome.
Mm. Yeah, that's what I would assume as well. Like if I'm bringing an interim or contracting, I would want them to get in and just get things done like day one, right? Because that's the whole premise of like not having a permanent role, which is a lot about career building, a lot about teaching and things. Interims are you often like, here's your gig, get on with it, which makes sense. So,
I guess the one bit in there as well that I have recognised a little bit is that I guess as an interim, it feels like you need to make friends less. You still need to build good relationships and be able to work well with people, but there's not. I'm not expecting like that longevity of and everyone needs to like me because I'm going to be around in this business for years to come. It feels much more about the impact that you can have in a short space of time, which doesn't
mm,
mean everybody liking you all the time.
mm. That goes back to that influence piece, which we mentioned quite, a couple of sentences back, which I feel like it's good to come back to. Do you have any tips of how you actually go around the office, and being influential? And maybe for the context of listeners, it's very, very important to be able to convince people about things, and especially in big organizations where you're going to have overarching initiatives where it's just not your call, and you need to have more buy-ins from different areas of business. Being able to influence people is what actually gets things done. Do you have a go-to of how
Yeah,
you do
so
that?
so it helps to have experience to draw on, so that you can talk about previous scenarios, but you don't want to be the person that's constantly saying, "But when this happened in X or when this happened in Y," because you're no longer in that role. You're now in this one. It helps to have theory and names to be able to put to the theory as well, so that you can stitch together those experiences with this is why it works and the theory that sits behind it. It also helps to have data in current role, so that you know, because you're typically working with a bunch of bright, intelligent people, and even if sometimes without the theory and the past experiences, if I lay the information out for you, you will arrive at the same conclusion I'm arriving at. It helps to be able to do a bit of a sales pitch as well. Something I've not talked about actually. I used to do door-to-door sales when I was like 16, 17 years old, and some of the concepts in there still stick with me now at 44. Just in terms of how you sort of drive interest in people and recognise buying signals and stuff like that. And finally, there's a book called Technology Strategy Patterns. It's one of the, the ones that have got the animals on the front that are like monotone, colour and white. Oh, Riley books, I think it is. There's a template in there for what's called an ask deck, which basically talks about how you tell a story in a presentation when you're trying to really win people over and get the decision that you're looking for. And it's all about sort of imperiling the hero, laying the data out, saving the hero, and then putting your ask in at the end. And I found that works really well as a structure when you piece all the other bits together of the softer influence of bringing people on the journey, combined with then the firmer, I need to get sign off from a budget holder or a decision maker.
I love that. That's a very good book. We'll add that in a resource for whoever is listening. From my perspective, Dave, I'm about shaking hands, talking with people, and saying everybody's doing a good job. That's my go-to to influence people, just on a human level, just basically recognizing people and building that relationship or connection first, and then moving to more tactical things which you mentioned. So
sorry, It's interesting how we're both flipping between, we're taking it in terms of the tactical and the softer one. Just depending on the topic that we're talking about. Sorry, just whilst we're around that as well, I assume you've come across transformational leadership before. Actually, sorry, you saying personally?
No, yeah, I wanted to ask if you mean personally. Okay, come up because that book or that title was out in my head.
So it's something that's in the Accelerate book. It's meant to be correlated with high-performing software delivery organisations. It made me think about it because the piece that you're describing around giving people like individual consideration, and spending time with each person is like a subset of. So transformational leadership covers individual consideration, intellectual stimulation, having a clear vision, and then role modeling the behaviours you want to see. And it's like, you live in one part of it there, and I imagine that you're doing the other bits as well.
So where I took this from, it's a book called Making Friends and Influencing People. It's a very old, when I say very old, I mean I'm probably just over exaggerating. I think it's like 70s book, and it basically just goes through the fact that there's about like 9 points of how you make friends and influence people. But one of the biggest is the fact that everybody likes to be recognized, and giving recognition, goes a long way to actually building relationship from which you can then start influencing people. So it's not really about like job influence. It's just in general. But it was written by a HR person, I think. And it's that's where I took this from. And I can definitely say that in an office surrounding, maybe in the remote culture, there's subtle differences, but in the office culture, just wandering around the office, saying hi to people, remembering their names, shaking hands, and just randomly going, I read this email, I saw this, this is great, you're doing a great job. It really goes a long way to open the doors to then actually have the chats about more strategic things and more tactical things, which you mentioned. These frameworks. So I want to say we've been touching on this almost like a mental health topic to some extent. We're not like professionals or whatnot. We're just discussing how we perceive and how we, dealt with imposter syndrome. But to finish the show with this question, Dave, do you think in the engineering or technological industry there's not enough attention to the mental health in general, like burnouts, what people are dealing with, imposter syndrome as well as an example?
Yeah, so I'm conscious that you said it as we wrap up the show, and I'm trying to think how not to give a 20-minute answer to the last question.
It's okay. Go. I'll take our time. 20 minutes. Boom.
So, yeah. um, and there's a lot wrapped up in there as well. Because if I think about the behaviours that I exhibited earlier in my career, I'd be working silly hours. It'd be constant crunch mode. You'd be, you'd be working long hours in order to hit a deadline. And I'd like to think that we create a better environment for the engineers that we work with now. It's very much dependent on the company that I'm in at a point in time and whether like the macro environment of the company helps support that as well, or whether you then need to take a company on that journey over a period of time to get it in a healthier place. So I'm going to touch the tactical and I'll get back to the mental health element of it as well. If you very much think about like the iron triangle, and you've got the cost, therefore people, time, scope, quality being the middle bit. Nice emojis popping up as well from last FM there. The challenge is always to say, well, the people and the time are relatively fixed. If you're giving us a fixed deadline, therefore we need to slip scope in and out. And I think that's a key element in helping protect people's mental health because it sets up healthier delivery methods where the date might be fixed, but we're not actually asking people to work 80-hour weeks in order to squeeze everything into that date or to slip quality, which destroys that intrinsic motivator of I'm doing a good job in my role. I don't think we always do a brilliant job of creating that environment as well. I know that I've not done a perfect job of creating that environment over, say, the past 10 years of leadership roles. Coming back to the mental health angle as well, so I'm thinking there a little bit about the environment that we create around it and trying to create a better environment. I do think there's a healthier environment nowadays for people to be able to speak up and say, I'm not happy with this, and for them to be able to reflect around what's driving that unhappiness and to be able to have an open conversation about doing something around it. But again, I think that comes from the management chain that you exist within and hiring good managers and leaders that create that environment for them.
It goes back to that psychological safety, isn't it? If people don't trust you, or in general, the whole, level of their peers, they're probably not going to talk about it. Like, they're not going to come out and go like, hey guys, I'm feeling this. Can we have a chat? Or, even one-to-one, right? Even one-to-one is a lot more intimate forum because it's you with your manager or leader. And if there's a safety in that, like, you will be able, or you will feel open to actually go like, hey, I'm burned out, or I feel anxiety. I feel like I have this imposter syndrome in this particular situation. And, then the role of the leader will be to actually help you to deal with that in a healthy way, right?
Sorry, and it ties in with the authenticity that you were touching on before as well, and the role modeling from transformational leadership. So therefore, you need to be able to role model as a leader and go, I'm a bit down today. I'm feeling burnt out and run down because I've been burning the candle at both ends, and to be able to share that in a group with the people in your teams, which then sort of makes it okay for them to be able to make the same statements back to you as well.
Yep, exactly. Someone needs to get the step one. So this is as well where I feel like leadership has to role model that behavior, because when you make that first step, you actually give a green light. You almost like give a freedom to someone else to come out and say the same thing. And it's very evident when you go to like, big events, like conferences, and someone goes like, do you have questions? And everybody feels uncomfortable to ask the question, but then there's one person who goes like, yeah, I have a question. He or she asks the question, and then the whole, another 10 question comes. So that first person indirectly gave permission for everybody else to ask. That's just like how people think. So as a leader, if you go out and you open up first, you're effectively giving permission for others to do the same. And it's very likely that people will follow. Just a sort of like a side note, and which leads me, I promise, to the last question: is there a correlation between imposter syndrome and burnout?
You mean people feeling inadequate, working too hard, burning themselves out?
Yeah, like effectively, you should be aware of this. Like, if you're feeling imposter syndrome, it's great. You're probably growing. Not probably. You are in an environment which will challenge you. That's why you feel it. So you will grow. But be cautious that overreaching might lead you to the burnout.
Yeah. Do you know what? So I think maybe between some of the sort of emotional and psychological drivers for imposter syndrome and burnout might be common, but some of that as well could just be, like, I used to describe it as having a chip on my shoulder about the background that I came from, and like, I'm going to achieve this and I'm going to achieve that. And I think the same piece is then driving you in terms of, or can be driving you in for some people in some scenarios, in order to make you want to put yourself in that position that makes you feel uncomfortable, and to push too hard, and to burn the candle at both ends. I think historically as well, that's just been a natural part of people's careers. Like a stage in your career that you revel in pushing yourself too hard and in sort of driving yourself out of those achievements. I think it probably still exists now as well, because you see people. I think you still see some people doing it now, but I definitely see like a Gen Z shift in not doing that blindly, making sure there's a really clear quid pro quo in that I get something back transactionally for putting myself out there for this. I think that's actually really healthy.
Yeah, I do agree. I absolutely 100% agree that glorifying hard work or a grind in general, leads to burnouts and anxiety and all sorts of issues, physically and mentally. And there's a shift, generationally speaking, where people understand that work is actually a transaction. I'm giving you my lifetime, and you're going to pay, for this. It's not like I have to, commit all my life to your company, because at any point in time I can lose the job, and here's another company. So it is a transactional rather than anything more. So, but how you take it as a role, it's personal, right? So everybody has different opinions, and culturally speaking, those opinions seems to be shifting. So yeah, I would definitely agree with that younger people now, they look at job in a more healthier way than, for example, I do. I'm battling burnouts all the time, man. Maybe because I'm workaholic, I don't know. I love what I do, but I tend to push myself way too much, to the point where I go like, okay, I need to stop for a couple of months now, and then I'm off again.
Yeah,
It's a very big problem.
In the past few years, I've adjusted my relationship with work. I'm trying to emulate Gen Z a little bit more.
I should be doing. That's what my wife is telling me as well. I'm not though. I should become better at this. Well, that was lovely, Dave. Thank you for coming to the show. I feel like we touched on very good topics. There's some tactical advices we gave to the listeners as well. I really enjoyed that. Hopefully you did as well.
Yep. Thank you, Mark. It's been fantastic. Really enjoyed it.
Cheers, Dave.